happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hello and welcome to Occupy TV. We've survived to our 43rd episode, and I have the pleasure this morning of not only interviewing but meeting Cindy Sheehan. Welcome to Occupy TV.
Thank you.
And I guess you did a small presentation last night for some folks, and could you tell us about that?
Well, right now I'm on a book tour for my new book, Revolution, a Love Story. I try to get that right. And my website will be coming up, and people can get more information on my website about that. But it's a book about the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela and President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. Since I've been an activist, since my son was killed in Iraq in April of 2004, I've been fortunate to travel to Venezuela and Cuba many times. And what I want to do with this book is set the record straight about Hugo Chavez and to explain what he's been able to do in Venezuela and try to inspire a little bit of that action here in the U.S.
So, yeah, I remember watching a documentary, in fact I have a copy of it, called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised,
Right.
Which is about, I guess, a coup that was run by the United States to try to get rid of him.
Right.
And the interesting thing was that a couple of filmmakers just happened to be in the presidential palace at the time. Right. So any thoughts about that or about the revolution in general?
Well, I have been at the presidential palace, and I was, President Chavez gave me a tour of where, like it was a guided tour of Revolution Will Not Be Televised. And so that was in 2002. I was there in 2005 in the middle of the vibrancy of the revolution. And Chavez told me, then I was able to go back in 2010 and actually sit down and interview him, much as we're doing right now. And he told me he literally owes his life to the people of Venezuela because when he was removed from office, like you said, there's been many documents exposed showing that the U.S. had a profound, part, of course, in all coups and assassinations in Latin America. We've had a profound part in that. But after he was removed from office, the people of Venezuela poured into the streets, surrounded the presidential palace, and demanded his return. He was within hours of execution, probably. And so the military who was on the site at that time saw that, and they removed the coup from power and reinstalled President Chavez to his rightful place. So it's a real synergistic atmosphere in Venezuela where people work together to make life better for everybody, not just the 1% of their country who were literally sucking the life out of the country until Chavez came along. Kind
of sort of like what's going on in America today.
It's extremely relevant to what's happening today in the U.S. In Venezuela, the income disparity was horrendous. Of course, people were poorer in Venezuela than we are here. I think it's in capitalism's best interest here to at least give us the appearance of, the 99%, the appearance of prosperity. But we're starting to catch on.
Oh, yeah.
That prosperity is very tenuous when they can have housing bubbles, when they can, where the mortgage companies and the banks can create the problem and not have to actually have any consequences and get bailed out.
Yeah, and then just collect the houses one by one as people go under.
Yep. So people are starting. We're starting to catch on here, and the United States, of course, has the widest income disparity of any so-called industrialized nation. Yep. Since Chavez has been president, he started his term in 1999. That gap has closed 50%. And extreme poverty has greatly been alleviated through his programs of free medical and dental, free education, subsidized housing, and subsidized food. So that gap has greatly decreased since Chavez, and it's possible to do. Of course, Venezuela is more of a democratic socialist country, not a socialist country, because capitalism, due to the fossil fuel economy, is still alive and well in Venezuela. And I think one of my criticisms of the revolution is that it relies too heavily, of course, on a fossil fuel economy. And I'm hoping in October there's another election. Of course, Chavez right now is suffering from cancer, and we're hoping that his recovery is going to be complete. And it looks like he will win re-election again in October. And I'm hoping that that administration will focus on, more sustainable and healthy forms of energy production and economy.
Yeah, just some of the comments that I've heard is that the reason that he has so much support from the people is that when somebody has a problem or they have a complaint or the like, for example, I don't have enough money to buy cement to repair my house, and all of a sudden the complaint is done and a bag of cement appears. And if you do that to your population, where you're actually empowering the people at the bottom who need to solve problems, suddenly you have support, as opposed to how fast can we extract wealth for the wealthy.
And he's having the reverse problem. He is equalizing the wealth and distribution of resources in Venezuela. For example, Venezuela has a terrible housing shortage, especially since the floods. Opposite problem in the United States. We have a couple million homeless and over 18 million empty housing units. Everybody in the United States could be housed. In Venezuela, they don't have enough housing units to house people. So they have a program where they're identifying if they need to either build new housing, and they're doing that by reappropriating land that banks have owned that has not been used. They're paying a fair price. They're not like stealing the so-called, the land doesn't belong to the banks anyway, it belongs to the people of Venezuela, building housing units, or like you said, identifying if the houses need to be,
repaired.
Repaired. And also, when I was in Venezuela in 2010, I visited a barrio, a very poor barrio called San Antonio, and they were able to, within 2 years, have an idea to construct a cable car, because their barrio is built on the side of a steep hill. They couldn't, anytime they need, there are no roads, no sewage. Anytime they needed anything, they had to walk, go to school, go to work, go to the store. Old, young, pregnant, sick, well, they had to walk up and down this steep hill. So the community said, we need a cable car. And the community designed it, came up with the idea, and in cooperation with the government that paid for it, they constructed within 2 years the cable car. And it cost less than a dime to ride every day. And it has like transformed the lives of the people in the San Antonio barrio. And it started with women, saying this is what we need. They identified the problem, and it was done. I rode the cable cars. They're really awesome. And that's what's happening in Venezuela. They rewrote the Constitution in 1999, and it was rewritten by the people, and there was a popular referendum whether they were going to approve the Constitution or not. And one of the branches of government is called people's power. So the government's not afraid of the people. in Venezuela. The government wants to share power with the people, and the people are proud of their government, and they want to share power with that government.
And the people are not afraid of the government.
Right.
Okay, huge difference.
Yes.
I mean, you talk to, for example, Tea Partiers in the United States, and they're anti-government. I mean, the government's bad. They're afraid of it. This and that. You know, it's different when the government is of the people, for the people, by the people.
I'm not afraid of this government, but I'm against it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would love to continue talking about that, but we're going to run out of time. Yeah. And so, you've got, there's issues around war that you've been fighting. I mean, we still have, you know, memories of you camping out at the Bush Ranch, you know, all that kind of stuff. I guess you have a couple of court cases that you're involved in, so why don't we move sort of to those areas?
And I actually have had 2 camps in Washington, D.C. since Obama's been president. Once was March of 2010, and once was July of 2010. In August of 2009, I tried to set up a camp in Martha's Vineyard in front of Obama, because we've seen that we've had a face change in the Oval Office, not any relevant good we've had some policy changes, but they haven't been good. And so I've been trying still to do my activism same. It's been harder under Obama. I don't have the same amount of support financially, or you know, I don't have the same number of bodies as you know, breathing warm bodies as I did when Bush was president. So it's been much rougher to be an activist under Obama. For example, when Bush was president, I got arrested in front of the White House at least a dozen times. And since Obama's been president, I've been arrested in front of the White House twice. The second time, I got a 4-month stay-away order from the White House. Never happened when Bush was president. I never had my freedom of speech limited like I have since Obama's been president. I've been a tax resistor since my son was killed. Now I'm a tax refuser. And the Bush administration could have persecuted me for that, and it didn't. But the Obama administration sent 5 U.S. attorneys from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento at my initial hearing, but claiming it's not a political prosecution. But we have U.S. attorneys in Sacramento that could have handled that case. However, they sent them from Washington, D.C. And I had a really lovely magistrate in the 9th District. I try to tell this story as often as possible. My attorney was able to go at length about why I don't pay my taxes, the wars, torture, drone bombing, the systematic oppression of civil rights here in the United States, the the oppression of movements and suppression of protest and things like that, on and on and on. Her son was killed in an illegal and immoral war. She hasn't had any justice for that. And when he was finished, the magistrate looked me right in the eye. He said, "Your response seems to be such a civilized response to such an uncivilized act." And then I've never had a sympathetic response from the U.S. government before. And the U.S. attorney wanted him to order me to cooperate with the IRS. And he said, "I don't think I'm going to do that." And he said, "It's lunchtime. I'm finished." We left. So I'm trying to cooperate as much as I can that doesn't compromise my values. You know, I'm not against taxes. You know, I'm not one of those kinds of people. If our taxes went for programs like they have in Venezuela, I would gladly pay.
So let's list what some of those programs should be. How about a universal single-payer healthcare system?
Yes, instead of
I started the list.
Corporate fascist system we have.
What other things?
Education. Yeah. You know, it seems like in the response to this economic crisis, money is being pulled from all of these programs. Education for just basically what the Pentagon gets in the budget without going into the black ops and the nuclear program and the supplementals for war. Pentagon gets $70 for every $1 education gets in the federal government. In my own state, where we keep on running California, we keep on running these $16 billion deficit. So what does the Democratic Governor Jerry Brown do? He takes money from welfare, he's taking money from food stamps, he's taking money from education. So education from preschool to university in this country should be free. The program... It's
free in other countries.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's done. It's done in other places, as Venezuela, as it is in Cuba, in many countries in Europe.
The whole thing with Canada is they're trying to make college not free anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
and they're trying to overturn the National Health Program too. The Canadians are rightfully proud of, and they won't let that happen. So the first thing that should be done under a revolutionary government is forgiveness of student debt. That is a number one thing. That would how many millions of dollars would that pump into the economy right away?
Let's just talk about debt for a second. I mean, we have all these houses out there which the banks wrote mortgages for. Now, where did the money that went into writing those mortgages come from? Was it borrowed from people who already had it, or was it created out of thin air?
It was created out of thin air.
So in other words, the banks are grabbing assets that they financed from money created with a fractional reserve system that essentially creates it out of thin air. So they don't have any money into those houses, but yet they are taking them over. They're taking real assets out of the society, claiming ownership, and they never, you know, the money was created out of thin air to finance those things originally.
Right.
I mean, I sense you and I share the same outrage over that particular system.
Oh, absolutely, and I understand when the crisis was happening, they only had to have 10% of their money in fractional reserve. Now it's zero.
Yeah.
So they don't have to have any fractional reserve at all. But I mean, yes, it's an outrage. It's an outrage that at the end of 2008 we bailed out these banks and financial institutions for $850 billion, and now it's up. The bailouts are numbering trillions of dollars, while we are losing our homes. And one thing I love about the Occupy movement in some communities is transition to anti-foreclosure movements, where they've been occupying the houses, and so that's what I'm talking about. You know, the capitalists, whatever the bubble is, they are creating these bubbles where they're getting rich during the expansion, and then they don't have to suffer any consequences when it bursts.
And then what they do is they collect the assets that were created during the bubble, during the troughs. I mean, so they get rich financing the problem, and then they grab assets, and then it goes back and forth, and it's just a scheme to transfer.
It's not even an asset grab because that should cover their losses. But we're also bailing them out with taxpayer dollars that are created with just a little, you know, Goldman Sachs needs bailout fee, they have it. We need a bailout. I'm sorry, there's no money.
Yeah, exactly. There was a thing on Democracy Now!, I guess about a couple of weeks ago, where they talked about $4 trillion of bailout money has gone to companies that are controlled by 18 current and former directors of the Fed. I mean, 18 people have been now given $4 trillion worth of the public nickel, and, you know, who's talking about that? You know, except for this sort of fringe media, nobody's even looking at that.
Right. Well, like I said, the average American, and I hate to use the term American because it's so arrogant. We're just part of the Americas, right? The average USAN is starting to get it. I mean, they're watching the news where they're saying Wall Street's doing great. The president is saying that the economy is recovering. The president's saying that we're creating all these jobs. And they're looking at saying, that's not my experience. Yeah. You know, I still don't have a job, or, you know, I'm barely keeping my nose a little bit above the water. It doesn't seem like we have all these empty storefronts in our community. The homeless problem is rising. We have all this debt that we're struggling to pay off, and that's not our experience. So they're starting to actually get it.
Yeah. It's taken a long time. I mean, I look at the amount of manipulation that's gone on in the society, just keep convincing people to vote against their own best interests. And slowly but surely, people are starting to see through that, which is encouraging. So how did the Occupy, you were saying that when Obama came into power, that the number of supporters sort of went down. How did Occupy, when it started, impact the work you're doing?
I was really involved in Occupy Sacramento. That's the closest Occupy movement to me. But I was able to go to several Occupies around the country. And the one thing, this show is about Occupy, what's the title of the show? Occupy War?
The Truth on War. So we probably should talk about war eventually.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that because I think one of the reasons our economy is, maybe the number one reason our economy is suffering so badly is because of the war economy and the trillions of dollars is spent on the Pentagon and the war machine in this country. And it's a situation where it's not even a healthy expenditure.
And why do we do it? What is the reason why? Why did we go into Afghanistan? Why did we go into Iraq? Why did we go into these other places? I mean, what's the point?
Well, there's a lot of money to be made by a few people, and empire is for the spreading of markets, the opening of new markets, and doing it in a imperial war machine. As Smedley Butler said it in 1935, war is a racket. It always has been. It's the oldest racket, the most profitable racket, where the costs are measured in lives and the profits are immense. But what I was going to say is that whenever I would go to an Occupy, I would look on this website called The Cost of War, and I would look specifically to that town, that county, and that state, and see how much money has been sent to Washington, D.C., you know, since 9/11. And I would say, you know, your town, this would be a fairly large town, has sent $3 billion to D.C. since 9/11. Is there something else you think? You're closing schools? So, you're firing teachers. You're, you know, you're cutting back on social services. You're closing parks and libraries. Is there anything that you think your community could have done with $3 billion besides send it to the war machine? So I think Occupy needs to be more vocal. Ending the wars, closing the 800 bases we have around the world, dramatically cutting back to our military to a reasonable size would help the economy so much.
So, I mean, we do sort of have this ocean on one side and ocean on the other. You know, we have Canada to the north. Okay, how much defense do we really need? Or is all of this stuff purely about power projection and
profit?
Profit for not the 99%, but
no,
for the
that's
1%.
What it, and unfortunately, the 99% suffer. My son joined the military in 2000 to be able to pay for a university education. And on the opposite end, my daughter, Casey's next oldest sibling, went in $50,000 into debt to get her master's degree. So education is not a privilege, it's a right. And the difference between our Constitution and the Constitution, the Bolivarian Constitution of Venezuela, is it doesn't talk about civil rights. It does talk about civil rights, but it talks about human rights.
Yeah.
It enshrines human rights. And President Chavez has gone light years to providing those human rights to the people of Venezuela.
Yeah, it's interesting that Eugene has voted the city council pretty much I believe unanimously, to adopt the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, now the question is, are we actually living up to that? You know, is it sort of more words and platitudes and all that nonsense, but no action? And unfortunately, in most communities that do that kind of stuff, that like to see themselves as forward-thinking, that's all you get is talk.
Well, I don't really know, but I'd like to know how many companies operating in Eugene profit from the war machine. I'd like to know how many military grants from the Pentagon the university gets and things like that too, because the U.S. military is not about human rights.
Yeah,
and neither is war profiteering.
Yeah. See, I graduated from MIT as an undergraduate, and the year that I left, I mean, of course, MIT is just funded top to bottom by the military.
Yes.
I mean, it's astounding the areas that that are in there that you wouldn't even think were being funded by the military. It's like, that's not military research, but totally they're on that.
Yeah.
And you know, especially areas like artificial intelligence and the like. But in my graduating class, 85%, okay, that's more than 4 out of every 5, went into a job whose primary purpose was to kill people.
Yeah.
You know, was to manufacture the devices used to kill people.
Right.
I mean, excuse me?
Right.
And I had a problem with that back then.
Absolutely.
And it really hasn't changed.
Right.
You know, and we start looking around at where we apply our talent in the United States. You know, it's not competing in making good things for people. It's in mastering the art of mass murder.
And it's really sad because even as close as the 60s, universities were still considered, paragons of free speech and activism. But since they did away with the forced conscription, which wasn't because they're good people, it was because they realized that forced conscription radicalized people. And they've made the universities more and more and more conservative by this program of, funding research through the Pentagon. And not only that, they've made them so expensive that people who go there are either going there because they're children of the war profiteers or banksters and they can afford to go there, or like my daughter, they're working full-time and going to school and amassing these terrible loans. So they don't really, even though my daughter has the revolutionary heart and radical heart like her mother, she didn't have time to, she had to work her job and do her studies. And and now, of course, she can't find a job in her field, so she's a bartender. And she's thankful for that job.
And she's got a $50,000 loan to pay off.
And she has a $50,000 loan. If she could, if that loan was forgiven, her community would have an extra $350 a month in the real economy. Yeah.
But it doesn't.
Right.
And the system the system is not working, just plain not working. And we have examples all around the world of how to fix it. But there is this sort of American exceptionalism.
Right.
The thing is that we are number one, we are the best, we are this, we are that. And yet we are failing to provide health care, we are failing to provide housing, we are failing to provide education, we are failing to do all kinds of things except beat up other people in countries and take their stuff.
Well, and I think from the perspective of the 1% is a planned failure. You know, you don't need to be educated to be slaves. Yeah. You don't need an educated workforce if all you want is debt slaves and wage slaves. In 2009, after Obama was elected, I wrote a book that was kind of prophetic about the Occupy movement. It was called Myth America, the 20 greatest myths of the robber class in the case for revolution. And I didn't break it up into the 1% and the 99%. I broke it up into the robber class and the robbed class. It was in 2008, I ran for Congress against Nancy Pelosi. And I got in San Francisco, and I got a political education that I could never have gotten in a university. And I wrote my book based on that and based on the bailout that happened at the end of my campaign.
So talk about your campaign. I mean, I didn't actually know that.
Oh, that's actually when I disappeared off the face of the earth. It's like I never worked so hard in my whole life, but my campaign wasn't covered.
That's surprise, surprise. So what'd you wind up with for final in the vote?
Well, I ran as an independent. In California, we call it decline to state. Had a much farther left platform than Nancy Pelosi. I ran against her based on the fact that her Congress, when she was Speaker of the House, kept on funding George Bush's wars, and that she refused to put impeachment on the table.
Right.
I still feel accountability as a very important issue. And so we opened up an office at the end of 2007 in the Mission District. And it was a campaign just to get my name on the ballot. We had to get over 10,000 signatures, and the more signatures we got, the less they would validate. So it was like the old frog jumping. I think if you went to MIT, you understand the frog jumping to the pond concept. If it jumps half its distance every time, it'll never get to the pond. And I was like, oh my God, we're never going to get, we could turn in like 100,000 signatures and still not qualify. But we finally, in the last day, qualified for the ballot. And I ended up getting 17%.
Oh,
and
that's not bad at all.
I came in second, and it was the first time since she ever ran that she got less than 85%, and she got 70% that year. However, I had volunteers come from all over the country on election day, and we were covering every supervisorial district. We didn't have enough people to cover every precinct, but we were moving our people around, and they were taking exit polls, and the minimum I was getting in their exit polls was 35%.
Really?
I got 60% in some districts, but I ended up getting 17%.
So the question is, based on that, are you suggesting that maybe all these paperless electronic voting machines actually don't work quite as they're supposed to?
Well, elections, one of the myths I dispel is that, elections are valid. Especially in the federal level, know. My dear friend now, Matt Gonzalez in San Francisco, ran against Gavin Newsom when Gavin Newsom first ran. And they had to have a runoff because it was so close. But during the runoff, they found an entire ballot box from one of the more radical districts in San Francisco floating in the bay. It just, I don't know, fell out of the trunk of somebody's car or something, I don't know. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. And I think we waste a lot of good resources and time trying to game the system using the system's rules. Yeah.
In other words, if the king can't win with the rules as they are, the rules will be changed.
Well, but like I said, I'm still grateful that I did that because I got a lot of education and experience.
Well, I don't know. I'd encourage you to do it again.
No,
not a chance, huh?
Well, not in the federal level. It's a waste of time. I am actually thinking of running for governor of California, and I'm thinking of running based on a Bolivarian concept of because I don't know, the United States is really big. It's over 300 million people. Venezuela has 26 million people. California has about 40 million people. If we could do this community by community, state by state, I think we'd have a better chance.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna have to reassert ourselves from the bottom up.
Absolutely.
Because the top end has been bought out completely. And even if you were to get there, I mean, we look at people like Bernie Sanders, who is another one of my personal heroes. He's deluded completely in the sense that there he is trying to do the right thing, and there's a few others like him who are just deluged under money that just influence outright purchased.
I think I almost made some people actually jump out the bus windows last night when we were having our event, because I told them I was glad Dennis Kucinich lost.
Yeah.
Because now he can join the vast majority of Americans instead of being just one voice crying out in the wilderness in Congress.
Yeah.
Not an effective voice either. Now he can come, join us. He's retiring from politics, going into activism, and I think that's where Dennis Kucinich belongs.
Yeah. So, you can try, but we had a discussion the last episode of Occupy TV on whether voting is worth doing. And even the person who was taking the position that voting is definitely worth doing, and I tend to agree with them, came to the conclusion that at the local level it has a huge impact.
Yes, that's my conclusion.
Okay?
Yeah.
But at the federal level and to a varying degree at the state level, it is completely neutralized by big money.
I agree. I agree absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually was thinking of creating a 12-step program for voters called Voters Anonymous.
Okay.
and even if you're not a voter, you can join a Vote Anon, friends or family of voters, And so, no, I totally agree. I think that, especially in the federal election paradigm, we get sucked into stuff that doesn't even matter. And, we're sending our money to people who don't need it because they're getting money from, the corporations and the banks and everything from their PACs. And, we're wasting our resources on. And this is what I said in my book, Myth America. You got Goldman Sachs candidate A, you got Goldman Sachs candidate B.
Yeah.
We're going to lose, but Goldman Sachs is going to win. And that's what's happening. If we use the language of Occupy, the 1% has selected these candidates, they've approved these candidates, they've vetted these candidates. The 1% couldn't care less if Romney wins or if Obama wins, because they're going to win.
Yep.
And we're going to lose every single time. So why don't we spend our time and resources on local elections and things that could actually matter?
Because it does matter how Eugene behaves does matter on who sits on the city council.
Absolutely. And we have more, I believe, some people in some communities have argued with me because they don't like their city council, or they don't feel like they have...
Well, it's time to fix it.
Yeah, well, they don't feel like they have, they feel like it's the same as the federal. We have more influence on city. I think school boards are very important for progressive people to get onto. Utility boards, water boards. Yep. Commissions. I think that is really important to. In Southern California, back in the 70s, we had this phenomena of right-wing Christians taking over school boards. Yeah. Why can't left-wing revolutionaries do the same thing?
Well, you happen to be sitting opposite from a newly minted police commissioner.
Oh, yeah? Oh, congratulations, I guess.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be an enormous amount of work, and it's going to be interesting. But and when Kitty Piercy is our mayor, and when she said that she was going to recommend me for the board, I said back to her, I'm not sure you're doing me a favor.
Right.
But working with the Occupy group, well, first of all, Occupy kind of took off the edge of the despair that I was feeling about a lot of other things. It felt good to have some other people hanging around that were like-minded. But the thing is that we had a lot of issues with the police during that whole experience, and it brought to light all of the other things, all the other things going on in the community where maybe the police could be acting a little bit better. And so it became real clear that was probably a good place to spend some energy. So, but
well, good luck.
Yeah, thanks. So back to your story. Now that I've interrupted that, Let's talk about the military, and let's talk about what do you think ought to be occurring regarding that?
Well,
I mean, how should we, how can we become effective at essentially getting that problem corrected?
Well, I think that how can we be effective?
Well, that's a tough one, but yeah.
It's a super tough one because we've had huge numbers in 2005, 2006. We had hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, D.C., and New York City, around the country, but the movement was co-opted by the Democratic Party, just like a lot of Occupy has now been co-opted by the Democratic Party. So I think what we basically have to do is get people to break through this, two-party scam.
Yeah.
Really. And until we break through this two-party scam, I'm afraid that our movements can't be very effective if it's channeled constantly into partisan elections. I don't know how we can be effective, but I think the answer to globalization, militarism, is localization. I really believe that. I had an organization that's kind of been a little dormant for a while, but it's called Recreating Revolutionary Communities, and we had a tour last summer. Our first stop was in Eugene. We went to the backyard chicken farmer, we went to the community farming, we went to the recycling center. Eugene has a lot of things going for it right now.
Enormous.
And so I think that we create, like you said, we create healthy communities and healthy regions, and it has to be grassroots up, but it can't be like a real steep vertical power structure. It has to be very horizontal, it has to spread very horizontally. And militarism, one of the best things we can do is fight to keep our kids out of the military, and fight to keep our own kids out, but to keep our neighbors' kids out, keep our community kids out. And it's so hard because they can't afford to go to college, they can't find a job. So a good thing that activists could do would be to have a cooperative where they work on jobs and internships and scholarships, because we can't just tell our kids not to go in the military. They have to have hope for a future. And so that's one way, is to prevent our children from participating. But we could do that, but the 1% is very focused, and they see that becoming a trend. And so what are they doing? They're expanding the use of robotic warfare. So if we don't care about our young people who are dying, and as a mother of a dead soldier, I can tell you that this country most of this country does not care that my son was killed. They don't care our own soldiers are killed. They certainly don't care that civilians are being killed. What are they going to do when our side is totally robotic, slaughtering civilians in other countries? So that's a big problem that I've been trying to focus on, my activism on, also is robotic warfare. No matter how much the unarmed aerial vehicles have expanded dramatically under Obama, the ground-based robotics have also expanded even more than the aerial vehicles. So we're working, and this is an area, I'm not sure in Eugene particularly, where where drones are manufactured, not too far away. And so, that's something that we can focus our activism on. USAians need to realize, you talked about American exceptionalism, that we are not the most exceptional people on the planet. I think every billion, every single one of us on this planet have the same exact existential imperative. And that's what we have to realize in the United States. We're a small percentage of the population, but we suck up most of the resources.
Well, we look at things. There was, of course, the 2000 World Health Organization report that put us at number 37. And we're probably lower in the list right now for a variety of reasons. But that means that at least 36 other countries provide health care better than the United States does.
But we have the best health care system in the world. I hear that all the time.
I do too.
You know, even from so-called progressives or liberals.
Yep.
We have the best, I said, we have the best health care system in the world if you're in the 1%.
Yeah.
If you're in the 99%, then, you know, I don't have health insurance. But you know what? I'm healthier.
Yeah.
Because I've had to figure out alternative, you know, alternative ways to keep myself healthy. So, I mean, we don't have, even if we have a healthcare system, I call it a death care system.
Yeah.
They want to keep us sick because that's where it's profitable.
Right.
It's not profitable to have healthy people.
No. And yeah, I've actually been doing some speaking as of late on the healthcare system, and the number one killer is, of course, tobacco. I mean, there's the list of things that appear on death certificates, but then there's the causes of death. Okay, number one, of course, is tobacco. Kills 450,000 people a year. Number two is just general ill health, where we're overweight and not get enough exercise. That means diabetes, you know, heart conditions, all that kind of stuff. 330,000 people a year. And then the next biggest killer is denial of service. People who, two categories. Number one is people who went to an emergency room and were turned away and then died in the parking lot.
Right.
And that's, you know, that's the extreme case, but that class of people ranges 15 to 20,000. And then the other 80,000 of that are people who were aware that they were having a problem but couldn't afford to go see help until it got so severe that it became irreparable, at which point they die. So denial of health care service in the United States has become the third leading cause of death. I mean, it is just staggering, and yet we talk about we have the best healthcare service in the country, or in the world, in the universe.
I was going to say
no
probably
less.
The universe.
Exactly. So we got about another 12 minutes to go. So where do you want to go from here on this conversation?
I don't know, wherever you want to go, I guess.
Oh, well.
We could talk about my radio show.
Let's talk about your radio show. Oh, yeah. And have we put up the website recently? Because Cindy's got a blog going, and that's Cindy Sheehan's Soapbox. That's Sheehan's with an S on the end, soapbox.com. And
if you Google my name, that's the first thing that comes up too.
Yeah, actually, you come up pretty high in the Google list.
Yeah.
You know, you don't show up if you just do Cindy. Yeah. You have to get the SHE, and then poof, there you are.
There I am. Yes, there's somebody named Cindy Sherman. I'm not even sure who that is. But in 2009, after my campaign against Pelosi, I could see that it was going to be extremely hard to be an anti-war activist, which I still am. So I started a radio show called Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. And it was at first on a local San Francisco radio station, but they were actually charging me like $1,100 a week to have my show. And I was like, I can't do this. This is crazy. So now it's based at my website. We have archives going back to my first show. So I have over 100 shows now. We have a new show almost every week, starting Sunday at 2, our time, the West Coast time, the best time. And then after that, it's on the archives for the rest of the time. And I've had some amazing, like Hugo Chavez, Yoko Ono. Tomorrow I'm having revolutionary cartoonist and author Ted Rall. He's a political cartoonist.
Yeah, actually, he did a book tour a while back on his, I forget the title of the book, but I bought a copy of it, and it was a good read. I gave it to several people.
He's really
where he's talking about the system can't be fixed anymore, and we really need to be looking at revolution. And the question is, what is that going to look like? How is it going to come down? And how can we minimize the impact from that?
He's very brilliant. You know, I think I'm also a revolutionary, but I think there's going to be, before a revolution, there's going to be a collapse. And
I agree.
So a lot of my activism is how do we minimize the impact to ourselves.
And that is the single specific reason why I got involved with the police commission. Because now that we're past peak oil, and agriculture is the practice of using dirt to convert oil into food. As the food system starts to become compromised,
the food to convert into energy.
Yep. Yeah, all that stuff. We're even substituting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, once the food system begins to have problems, the question is, what's it going to look like locally, and what are the police going to be doing? Are they going to be bringing out their sonic cannon and their tank to teach people who are starving a lesson? Or
yes.
are we going to try to fix those problems, you know, within the community, the relationship between the police and the community before the crisis hits?
Well, you see already a movement where communities are making it illegal to grow your own food.
Oh yeah.
Especially in your front yard.
Oh yeah.
Where they're making it illegal to collect your own water.
Yeah.
But I think we look at the model of Cuba. Cuba collapsed when the Soviet Union collapsed.
And there's an excellent documentary there
yes.
called The Power of Community, How Cuba Survived Peak Oil.
And they
Wonderful.
had to do it post-collapse.
Exactly.
We should be doing it pre-collapse. And they're an excellent model for what we need to be doing in our communities. Food security is the #1 issue that we should be working on as families, as community, is food security. And we're doing that in my own family.
Yep.
I mean, I look back at the Depression, the Great Depression here in the United States, and my parents and grandparents talked about that. You know, they were able to survive that because they were community.
Exactly.
And they did. There wasn't one person that didn't grow something, and have chickens and goats.
Yep.
And so we really need to. We're not community anymore, and we don't do that kind of thing anymore. So we need to really start learning the lessons of our own history and other recent histories to be able to survive what's coming up. And I am 100% in favor of this empire collapsing.
Oh yeah.
But I don't want it to collapse on me. I don't want it to collapse on my family. And of course it would have horrendous implications worldwide, globally. It would have horrendous implications. But there are ways that we can protect ourselves and the people we love. And you know, the people I love are 7 billion people on this planet.
Yeah. Looking back, getting back to the whole thing about parents and grandparents, my mother's job, when World War II started, I believe she was 13, and her job at that time was to go around to all the neighbors and see if they had any old tires, because they needed them recycled. And so what would happen is she would go knock on all the doors and find these tires and arrange for a truck to come in and get them so that they could be melted down to make more tires.
Right.
And you know, that was a 13-year-old's job in her larger community, and there were everybody in the community had a job that contributed to growing food, making resources, dealing with whatever. It was an amazing period in history following the Great Depression, where people had to get together and just to survive, and doing many of the same things. And I think following the collapse, we're going to have to look at reconstructing those kinds of aspects of community.
Well,
and so we should be working at it now.
Yeah, Americans aren't prepared for this, and we need to, like you said, work on it pre-collapse, not post-collapse.
Exactly.
And you know, one of the biggest things is turning off the TV and getting out of your pod.
Yeah, as we sit here making more TV.
Well, don't turn it off till the show's over, by the way. But, you know, I'm not against TV. It's valuable. There's a lot, like this show, there's a lot of valuable things on, but it's caused us to stratify away from community. You know, the thing I loved about Occupy was it was getting people together to chat again. You know, we don't go to our corner pub. We don't have coffee over our coffee tables, like, you know, even when I was a young person growing up in California, you know, all the mothers would get together and chat. The fathers would get together and chat. We'd have neighborhood barbecues and things like that. Yeah. And we talk about these things. We don't talk about these things, so we think we're the only ones suffering.
Yeah. I grew up with a mother who stayed home and was to some degree involved, not as much as some of the other people in the community. But all the mothers today are working.
Working.
Okay.
Yeah.
They are now out there making rich people richer.
Right.
Okay, because every minute that you work, the system, because of the way it's financed, is making some rich person richer.
Right. So I think that if a woman wants to work, she should be able to work.
Absolutely.
And, I agree with that, but I think that our focus has to be more away from supporting the system. Yeah. And removing our consent from the system.
If we weren't actively making rich people richer, how much time would the average person have to work in order to provide food, shelter, warmth, units of transportation, education, all of those other functions that make life worth living?
Right.
Okay. If we weren't making rich people richer, the estimates come back, 20 hours a week, 15 hours a week, whatever. They're all low numbers that don't mean that everyone has to be working.
Right.
That, that the parents couldn't be, raising their kids or finding other ways to do that kind of stuff. It's all about maintaining the system. And we keep working harder and harder for less and less.
Right.
So 2 minutes to go. Take over. Yeah, put you on the spot, huh?
I know.
Yeah, we got any closing thoughts that you'd like to add that we haven't covered at this point?
That's too broad for me in the morning.
I see. So, but I do.
I'm sure there's many interesting things we could talk about.
Well, yeah. I mean, all the stuff you were talking about Hugo Chavez at the beginning, and life in Venezuela getting better because they have a government that works for the people, not for rich people. Right. We talked about, the whole war thing, and how much of our resources are coming out of our communities to go into something that again allows rich people to get richer. We talked about the impending collapse, which is coming, and how we need to actively be involved in changing the society that we live in order to make it possible to survive it in a reasonable manner. Care to add to that list?
Well, I think the collapse of the Soviet Union, of course, was because of their military.
Absolutely.
They were allegedly communist, but they were very military and totalitarian. And I think it surprised a lot of people. Yeah. Reagan being probably the number1 person that was surprised that happened. And so, if we don't study what happened there and how their 12-year long military misadventure in Afghanistan, where the U.S. was fighting a proxy war against the Soviet Union, raising up the Taliban, training, supporting, arming Osama bin Laden. If we don't study that and learn those lessons and not be surprised about the collapse of the United States, we might have the same thing happen that happened in Russia now. Russia has, the Soviet Union has been replaced by something that is not as bad, but certainly we could conceive of a much better paradigm in the United States if we learn those lessons and aren't surprised by our collapse. It will collapse. Okay. Empires always collapse.
We've run out of time. So on that note, you got the last word, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Okay.
See you folks next time on Occupy TV.
Peace out.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to what's going